The COVID-19 pandemic might have changed the way we look at life in general, but it was technology that connected all of us because our schools, our work, and just about everything else took a digital turn. Something that would have otherwise taken more than 2 years, according to Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. But the COVID-19 pandemic also forced us to think about a global pandemic before the modern technology, or what it was like to live during the Black Death. Well, that's exactly what we discuss in this video. But before we begin, you are watching Binge History, a place where you can binge history like you binge eat. So make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for more interesting content. The Black Death was a bubonic plague pandemic that completely shook the medieval Europe. Occurring in Afro-Eurasia from 1346 to 1353, it is the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history, with around 75 to 200 million deaths. The threat of the Black Death was one of the most defining characteristics of life during the medieval and early modern Europe. So, how exactly was it to live through a plague? Well, people decided to face this epidemic differently. For most people, they decided to accept the fact that they will die soon within a few days, while the others, especially the rich, tried to fulfill all of their last desires. But how did people protect themselves from it? And who did they blame when they got sick? How did their body react as the infection spread? Well, the truth is, the bubonic plague in the Middle Ages did not spare anyone. Even the rich were affected by it, just like the poor. Imagine yourself in the middle of an epidemic with a 100% mortality. You wake up on a cloudy mid-morning in late 1348. You look out your window outside. You see a lot of carts that carry dead people, and you could also hear people mourning over the deaths. Their infections were spread by rats, with fleas carrying the bubonic disease. When an infected flea bites someone, the victim rapidly comes down with symptoms such as swollen buboes in the lymph nodes. About 80% of infected victims passed away within a week. People used to believe that buying flowers would protect them against the plague, as they thought diseases spread because of foul smells. The theory, also known as the miasma theory, was an obsolete medical theory where people used to believe that foul air was the reason for diseases, even though that was clearly not the case. Just before the plague struck Italy, there were earthquakes, and doctors believed that the toxic air from inside the earth would be the cause of the plague. The most common job during those days would be a gravedigger because of the huge number of people who died due to the plague. The epidemic created a health crisis with thousands of bodies accumulating on the streets, so authorities needed to put up a proper plan to dispose of the bodies safely. This was when city leaders decided to hire the economically weaker sections of the society to carry the bodies away. The land was required more than ever to bury the bodies. Multiple bodies used to be buried in a single grave. People also did not have any money at this point because economies were completely shattered, and because of which most people could not even afford a proper funeral. So, the only option for the relatives of the deceased would be tossing around their loved ones in mass graves. Even doctors were clueless on how to cure the disease, and medicines never worked the way they were supposed to. Medical professionals were exposed to the epidemic more than anyone, and many were infected with the disease, which resulted in a huge shortage of doctors at the time. These doctors took great care of the patients, but they had nothing to protect themselves from the disease other than flowers. Imagine people running around carrying flowers to protect themselves from the COVID-19. Well, thanks to technology, we don't have to deal with things like that anymore. Although medical professionals later learned from their mistakes and made a distinctive plague outfit that covered their entire head to give them a lot of protection from disease, it was too late. Now, let's say that you are among the few people who survived the plague. Well, then you will have people around you check your armpits for buboes. By 1348, literally everybody knew that the plague victims first showed symptoms of fever, followed by swelling in the groin and armpit areas. Most victims died within 3 days of showing the first symptom, and by now, Europeans clearly knew that the disease was extremely contagious, but they still had no clue how the disease used to spread. People would also turn to religion for help. However, if you were visiting a church, you would see priests were not any more special than the ordinary citizens. Many of them would also get infected and passed away. So, the church was also not the best place to protect them from an epidemic like this. The pneumonic plague is another plague besides the bubonic plague. For this type, you do not see buboes appearing. Instead, you would have headaches and your limbs would feel weak. You can't really breathe, and that's when you know you got a pneumonic plague with also a 100% mortality rate. An interesting thing people did to confront this disease back then was to drink heavily, enjoy life to the fullest, go around singing, merrymaking, and fulfilling all kinds of cravings whenever they got the opportunity because they knew they would not escape their inevitable death. Now, your doctor might try to help you, but they have no clue what is going on. Your breath will become shorter and shorter, and then you will finally face your death. Many physicians and doctors would then do an autopsy and dissection of your body to figure out what could have caused a disease like this. The medical investigations were successful, and the cause of the plague was due to a bacteria known as Yersinia pestis. However, it wasn't until 1894, more than 500 years after the outbreak, that Yersinia pestis was first isolated, and there was no cure until the discovery of antibiotics during the mid-20th century. Life during the Black Death was definitely unpleasant. Even if you might not die from the horrible symptoms of the disease, you might die due to starvation, and that was very likely because the Black Death wiped out many villages and no one was left to work on land and grow food. It is estimated the Black Death killed about 30% of the European population, and England lost between a third and a half of its population. By 1350, the Black Death had run its course in England. There was no particular reason why it came to an end. Maybe it came to an end because it simply ran out of victims to claim. So, what do you think it would be like to live during the Black Plague? How about comparing it to the COVID right now? Do let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, consider subscribing to our channel for more content just like this one, and make sure to turn on post notifications so that you get notified whenever we upload a brand new video. Thank you for watching Binge History, and we will see you in the next video. Bye!